Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Lauren Anderson. I'm the Director of Programs here at Perry Worldhouse. And it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this event, which will discuss the launch of a new DevLab at Penn, an International Organization for Migration, IOM, policy project. This public discussion is the concluding event of a weeks-long conference Perry Worldhouse hosted that is titled Migrant to Mainstay, Safeguarding Human Rights After the Journey. I couldn't imagine a better way to conclude our academic proceedings than by recognizing the start of work that will use cutting-edge technology and data analysis to address many of the challenges highlighted in our proceedings this week. Here today to introduce this event is Perry Worldhouse Distinguished Global Fellow and Director General of the IOM, Ms. Amy Pope. Amy is known as a champion of data and one who has put her ideals into action through, for instance, the IOM's Global Data Institute. It is this leadership that laid the basis for the partnership we are launching today between Penn and the IOM. But please allow me to introduce Amy Pope to you formally. Amy became Director General of the organization of the IOM on 1st of October 2023, bringing a wealth of experience in addressing complex migration issues and a passion for changing the global narrative about people on the move. She is the first woman to hold the post in the IOM's 73-year history. Before joining the IOM, Ms. Pope served as the Senior Advisor on Migration to US President Joe Biden and served as the Deputy Homeland Security Advisor to President Barack Obama. Ms. Pope graduated magna cum laude from Duke University School of Law with a JD and has a BA in Political Science with honors from Haverford College in Pennsylvania. Director General, thank you. Thank you for your work and for spending time with us here at Perry Worldhouse this week. Please join me in welcoming Amy Pope.
Well, it's so exciting to be here with all of you. And as I said to the group of students that I met with earlier today, I'm really impressed that it's a sunny Friday afternoon before Easter and you're all sitting in here for this conversation. It's a real testament to your commitment to the work and to what we're trying to accomplish together. I also want to say a very, very special thank you to the Perry Worldhouse for welcoming me as a fellow and bringing this partnership to life. To Coco Warner, who has really driven the partnership from within IOM, and to Dr. Eric Kibbles for driving the partnership with DevLab. So, when we talk about migration, there are lots and lots of anecdotes. And in fact, it often looks like policy is being driven based on anecdote, experience, gut feeling, sentiment, often not very kind sentiments. And ultimately, what I see happening all around the world is that people are acting and reacting and making serious policy decisions based on those gut feelings. And that's a dangerous place to be, right? We all know, and I'm guessing if you're here and being part of this conversation, you have already bought into the values of using data, using evidence to drive better outcomes. And it's especially true when we talk about migration. Right now, we have more people on the move than ever before. We have 47 million people who are newly displaced as a result of climate change and of conflict. And for the first time, really ever, we're seeing increased numbers of people who are being displaced as a result of the impacts of climate than of conflict. So people who've lost their homes because of a drought or because of a storm or because of desertification, and they can no longer make a living. The World Bank is estimating that as many as 216 million people could be displaced in the future as a result of the impacts of climate change. And at this moment in time, we actually don't have very good solutions to people who are going to lose their livelihoods, their homes, their futures as a result of what's happening because of climate and natural disaster. And what we see as a result is that when we don't have good policy solutions, when we aren't engaging strategically and proactively from the beginning, then it's the people themselves who lose, right? It's the communities who are hosting large waves of migrants who feel pressure in terms of access to social services or schools or hospitals. It's the communities who are losing talent because their young people are leaving in high numbers. And it's the migrants themselves, frankly, who are often subjected to abuse or exploitation, who are facing horrendous, horrendous pressures when they move, and who are, frankly, in many cases, dying en route. And that's just not a way to do business, right? It's not humane, it's not moral, but actually it's not even strategic, practical, efficient, or effective. And so our view is that if we want to get our arms around this phenomenon, we need to step out of the 20th century and step into the 21st century and start using the tools that are available to us to start to proactively engage, forecast, respond to the phenomenon of migration. And we see even in terms of our humanitarian response, even when we're looking at waves of movements that are coming quickly without any sort of anticipation, we can use better data. So we saw some examples, for instance, in response to the floods that happened in Libya. When we were able to use mapping data about where community settlements were located, we were more able to very quickly get humanitarian support to those communities in need, as opposed to sending out scouts on the ground to figure out what's happening and who has access, who doesn't have access to services. But you think about something like desertification or drought, and you think about how much better we could do if we actually start to use what we know about the impact of climate on the movement of people, what we know about people's livelihoods and how dependent they are on the land, what we know about the resilience that is now within their communities, and putting these all together, what we know about the likelihood of displacement. Now, there's something I cannot understand in terms of how we normally respond. We see, I've said this before, but to me, it's very apt. We see the train. We see the train, it's coming down the track. We know that the desertification, the drought, it's happening. And we just watch the train. We stand on the tracks and we watch it. And we wait and we wait and we wait. And then we're surprised when we get hit by the train, right? And that's kind of how we do humanitarian response right now. And there's no reason for us to do that, because with the kind of mapping that DevLab is doing, with the kind of analysis, with the forecasting and machine learning that now exists, we can start to predict that that train is going to come down the track and it's going to run us over unless we get out of the way. And so our job is to enable more communities to get out of the way, as opposed to get run down by that locomotive with the tremendous disaster, loss of life, chaos that entails. So we're super excited to be here today because, frankly, we within IOM are humanitarians. We only have a handful of data scientists and analysts. But the power of this partnership is we're actually drawing on a community of people who do this for a living and who want to do it with real life impact and who want to make a difference, who want to help people along the way. And I know that there is tremendous good we can do when we get people who know how to use the data that exists, who know what the data sets are, aligned with our humanitarian actors who know where the people in need are. And so this marriage between IOM with our experience on human mobility and disaster response and humanitarian work in over 180 countries for over 73 years, to DevLab with its cutting edge capabilities, with its big data analytics, its advanced computational methodologies. I don't even know what that is, but I'm pretty excited about it. This marriage is going to mean that more people can lead a better life. It's going to mean that more people will be able to make choices about their life. And ultimately, I think this is what is really behind the concept of sustainable development. It means that we don't wait until that train comes down the track and runs us over. But it means we enable people to get out of the way and build another road, to build another pathway, or maybe get on that train and ride it to the end. And that's what I'm hoping we're all going to do today. So it's not going to be easy. And I think all of us know we're facing some really serious challenges, some serious headwinds, particularly when it comes to funding. But it's for that reason, more than anything else, that it's critical that we build this partnership, because frankly, we don't have a lot of money to burn. We don't have a lot of time to waste. And it's not just about doing this for the sake of looking good and signing agreements. It's really, frankly, doing it for the millions of people that we are serving all over the world. And so I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm so pleased to commemorate this partnership. And I'm so grateful to all of you for being here to witness this. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Carter. I'm with the World Resources Institute, and I'm happy to be your moderator for the last session on a Friday. It's going to be a great session, and I am super excited about the big reveal of what the DevLab at Penn will do. I'm excited to hear more from Dr. Weibels and Dr. Warner. So my work at the World Resources Institute is on climate change adaptation. I'm the director of WRI's Climate Adaptation and Resilience team. And I jumped at the opportunity to come and moderate this session because WRI is known for data tools. I mean, we're an organization of about 2,500 people in 12 offices around the world. And a lot of the work that we do is working with decision makers to help them make better decisions. And we do that by helping them to have data and evidence that they can understand, that is tailored to their needs. For adaptation, I am going to say, after working on it for about 25 years, since I was a graduate student in anthropology, has been a bit behind the times, especially when we compare it to mitigation. But the need for it becomes clearer every day. And I don't think there's any more denying that. It's no longer an issue for someday. It's an issue for right now that we're dealing with. So we've been thinking a lot about what a data platform for adaptation might look like. We have platforms for example, Global Forest Watch, monitoring forest loss across the world. The Land and Carbon Lab helps us to see sort of how landscape changes affect global carbon flows. We have a platform called Aqueduct that shines a light on water use and water demand. So we've been thinking a lot about one for adaptation would look like. And, you know, I understand that throughout the conference, climate change has been a factor, and that's easy to see why that would be the case. And whatever it ends up looking like, you know, migration will need to be one of the options. I mean, when we talk to policymakers about what kind of information they need, they tell us that they need better projections, right? They need downscaled information about what is going to happen where, and there's all kinds of challenges with that. But they also tell us that their understanding of what to do about those climate risks once they better understand them is very limited as well. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking into and trying to help identify what is the best intervention in different contexts. You know, what is the best investment that once those policymakers see the train coming down the track, better understanding what their risks are, what should they be investing their scarce development dollars in? So I'm going to stop talking and hand over the mic now to Dr. Coco Warner of IOM, whom I understand that you have met already through the conference. No need for an intro. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca, for coming. Although, yeah, just so excited to sit next to you. WRI's work is well known and important. And hi, everybody. We've had a chance over the past 3 days to talk a lot about some of the most salient issues of our time, and thanks also especially to the students who came back. I know you're up against finals coming up in the next week or 2 or 3, whatever. So it's really great to spend this Friday afternoon together. I couldn't wish for a better introduction, and IOM has incredible leadership with Director General Amy Pope, basically just laying out some of the challenges that we're up against together. I'd like to add, she has mentioned it earlier this week, but our organization has 3 strategic objectives, and data serves each one of those. IOM is working to save lives and deliver solutions to displacement, that's 1 and 2, as well as to help countries think through and build migration governance and have the conversations around borders and make sure that when people do move, that it's legal, that it's dignified and safe, rather than the patterns that we see in so many cases all too often, in which many of you have been presenting your really compelling work. So to tee up Eric's presentation of what we're going to do together, I think Amy Pope did a beautiful job laying out some of the problems we're facing on, numbers we haven't seen before, tens upon tens upon tens of millions of people who've been displaced, some of them within their own countries, millions more beyond the borders of their own countries. We see impacts of flooding, drought, heat events, like weather that wasn't that way over the past 30 or 60 or 100 years. And these are large scale changes and ultimately a really almost philosophical question of people moving in dangerous, inhumane situations from the frying pan to the fire. And with all that we know, with all of our ability to exercise our practice in the world, we think that through our partnership, we can help make it better a bit through our work on data and modeling and analytics. And Eric, you're such a pro, and we couldn't be more delighted to partner together with the DevLab. But to tee that up, I've prepared a couple of slides, and I'm going to just share 3 things that we're going to be doing together. And so, and each one of these lines up against these problems that DG Pope or Amy Pope talked to us about. We have these large numbers of people being displaced. And together with DevLab, we have some data answers that address some of those. We know that we're experiencing drought and flood and all kinds of environmental disruptions that put people on the move. We think that through our combined efforts on data and analytics, that we can help drive preparedness and help governments and communities get people out of harm's way in time or reduce the impacts, make sure people have more choices and are more enabled, also more self-reliant, because as Amy Pope said, we're in a moment where we need to do more with far fewer resources. And then ultimately that question of, can we together tackle some of the most at the pointy end, the trafficking, the smuggling, things that are actually quite hard to see through data because the very nature is illicit. So those are 3 things that we'll be looking at together. Let's see if I can make this thing work. So something Eric's going to walk us through in greater detail is the idea of forecasting displacement. For the past 2 decades, IOM has been collecting data on displacement, the age, the sex, as well as the nationalities, the needs of people who are facing displacement, who are living in displacement. And we're wondering with this data, this is a question that we brought to the University of Pennsylvania, would there be a way to look back in order to look forward? And I think, Eric, you're going to share some of the initial thoughts. As I also mentioned, we're looking at some of these big environmental challenges. Now, if you're wondering about the graphic that you see pulsing in the background, this is actually work that we've done in Sudan on conflict. But it's an example of the kind of work that we can do together, even with other drivers of displacement and migration, like floods and droughts. We know where people come from. We know because of our data collection and analysis where people are going, and that's the pulsing that you see in the background. And what we'd like to do is to get a sense of those patterns so that we can inform the early responders, those who are involved in disaster risk reduction and anticipatory action. So that's that piece. And then I mentioned briefly this third piece, are there ways that we can work together and harness some of the technologies that are already in use by people who are moving along these very, in some cases, really dangerous routes, and help empower them, but also help empower those official as well as civil society actors that are trying to help people and help people get out of these really difficult situations. We are excited and we're early on in our journey, but some of the results are enhanced insights for policy, as well as the many, many actors in society like you, academia, as well as some of the most important think tanks and NGOs in the world. We think that we'll be able to deliver more timely action, more timely data. Every second counts in a disaster or a conflict, and teaming up and being able to forecast and foresee saves time, that saves money, and ultimately that can save lives and livelihoods and help improve the situation. Inform adaptation, inform all of these good things. And I think with that, I just turn over to you, Eric. I think we're all really excited just to hear about the work itself.
Okay, I'm going to wait on this set of slides. And as they're coming up, I just want to say thank you to you because, you know, I've been doing this for 2 decades and building these partnerships is never easy. And this one has gone at warp speed compared to many of them. And that I think that's a statement to IOM's sort of really having some skin in the game. And that's really about you and your people. So thank you. Okay. So I am a professor of political science. I'm a co-director of this lab. I'm going to walk you through some very, very preliminaries on 3 projects that we are working on together. They're going to go in order of like something where we actually have some real data and very, very preliminary results to something where I can just show you some maps of brand new data bearing on sort of environmental impacts on displacement. And then the third one is really like, it's not a pipe dream. It's a practical, doable dream about which we have an ambition. I think all of these are incredibly important projects, and I think my hope is we can really make a difference with some of these things. Okay, so let me just give you a sense. I do want to talk a little bit about the partnership before talking about the projects. And these are the things that, from our point of view as academics, this is what we get out of partnering with an organization like IOM and with GDI in particular. So there are 70-something thousand enumerators that IOM has had in the field. That's like crazy, right? We try to raise enough money to hire 12 enumerators to collect some data somewhere. So this is like unparalleled data collection. We get a set of puzzles that I think are incredibly timely and important. Like IOM has to answer questions like every day about lives. And these are things that academics, we'd like to be practical, but our incentives oftentimes aren't to be super practical. Here we get to force ourselves to engage in very practical problems. The kinds of puzzles that you're trying to solve are just, they're urgent. I think the third bit here is the openness to co-creation. This is you. So again, thank you so much for making the co-creation happen. It's very hard to work across these academic policy boundaries sometimes, and to find sweet spots is just really lovely. And then there are students here and there are staff here who are engaged in some of the work that I'm going to be presenting. So I think there's a real opportunity here for students to engage on pressing issues. So I think there's a lot of nice stuff going on with this partnership. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through 3 projects real quickly. The first one is on forecasting population movements, and I'm going to show you some things that are like, especially at the end of this conference, like really boring, right? We know that migration is a really big issue. We know that displacement is a really big issue. So here we have, this is all IOM data, by the way. So thank you for creating all the data that we all rely on in this space. So in 1995, we have 160 million people. In 2020, we have 281 million migrants. And of course, we know that all of this is dwarfed by what's going on within countries, i.e. the amount of displacement within countries. So we know that this is a really big thing. And as Amy was mentioning, like policy is 100% reactive. Like bad things happen and the world responds. And so what everyone would like to know is, can we get in front of these problems at all? And that's really a question of, can we have some foresight about what's coming 3 months from now or 6 months from now? And that is what this project is really about. So the question here is, how do internal dynamics within sending countries, okay, how do those internal dynamics impact the incidence of outmigration or the incidence of internal displacement, okay? And that's historically been a really, really hard problem to answer, in part because the data universe has been so fractured, which is what you all have made so much progress on in recent years. The goal here is to use IOM's data on monthly internal displacement. That's what we want to target. So what we've been working on with Risky and Coco is like trying to understand exactly what's going on in IOM's monthly displacement data. That's a piece of this that is still in the works. So I'm not going to show you results specifically on that. I'm going to show you results on something that's related, just to give you a sense of what we're trying to do. So in this case, we're going to be using monthly data from DHS on southwest border encounters, okay? And that data is available on country of origin. So by month, you get the number of Guatemalans who have been encountered at the southwest border. You get a number of Salvadorans that have been encountered at the southwest border. And so the question is, what is going on in these places that might allow us to predict months later the incidence of encounters at the southwest border, okay? How to do this? Well, historically, we haven't had great monthly level data in countries like Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and Mexico, et cetera. So what we have been doing and what we bring to the table on a purely original data side is data on 19 different kinds of things that are happening at high frequency in these places, okay? That might be security raids, mobilization of security forces, protests, violence, these kinds of things, okay? And then we're gonna add to that high frequency economic data, a sense that like monthly and quarterly economic dynamics can be important drivers of migration. Okay, we're going to use machine learning to predict big increases in these numbers. Okay, I can talk for a long time about what's weird about this data. Like DHS data is a little bit odd. So we have a target that is difficult, and it's complicated by stuff happening both in a place like Guatemala and in the U.S. because the amount of border enforcement is changing over time. Okay, so this is what we're trying to do. So we have results. Okay. It doesn't matter that you don't know what these things mean. The key thing to note here is that when we're thinking about 3 and 6 months out, at this point, at a very, very preliminary stage, this is about the kind of accuracy that you get from the best geopolitical forecasting on something like civil conflict. Okay, so this is going to actually get I think this is going to get quite a bit better. Okay, the other thing that's really great about these models is this. This is a fancy data science term for what is the thing that is driving these forecasts, okay? We can uncover that out of these models. And here's just the results for Guatemala. So this is a 3-month forecast. What are the big things pushing around the forecast on Guatemala? And you can see, so coup, that first thing is coup. So that is reporting in Guatemala. Of course, if you know anything about Guatemala, you know there has not been a coup. But there was a democratically elected leftish president in 2023, where there was a concerted attempt to prevent him from coming to office, which is oftentimes reported as you know, a coup without the military, an attempt to use the legal system to conduct a coup. So this is like predictive of later flows to the border. This is an indication of insecurity. We see things like inflation. Monthly inflation rates 12 months back are telling us about the flow of human beings at the southwest border 3 months later. We see things like mobilization of security forces, lethal violence, the kinds of things that at a monthly level we haven't really had data on. We now have monthly data on, and it ends up these are doing a reasonably helpful job in helping us predict into the future what the flows are going to be like. So this is suggestive that you might be able to really gain some foresight out of this exercise. This is a 6-month forecast. It doesn't really matter. Again, I mean, it matters in the sense that like it's helping us know what are the things that we should be paying attention to now if we want to understand flows 3 and 6 months out, okay? Project number 2, climate change, adaptation, and displacement. Obviously, this has sort of been this has come up a lot over the course of the last couple of days. We all have this strong prior that climate change is driving displacement, is driving internal displacement, is driving external migration. And it's the trick is it's really easy to get that kind of map. That is an aridity map. Okay, it's high resolution. You can get this every year. It's super cool. The trick from the point of view of the research world and people who care about displacement is that we care about how humans are responding to this, and we have had crappy data on that. So we don't have high resolution, historically have not had high resolution data on human adaptations, on social responses, on economic responses, okay? And that means that even if we understand sort of, there's going to be a very complex temporal relationship between a drought and human behaviors sometime in the future, we haven't had anything really on the behavior side, except for very gross country level annual data. So here what we have just been collecting, there are members of the team here, is new data on 17 different kinds of environmental events. Again, this is going to be for about 65 countries at the level of months, going from 2012 to like last month. And the kinds of things we're looking at is environmental violence, environmental displacement, environmental protests, environmental activism, all these kinds of things that it ends up, as I'll show you in a minute, these things vary a lot over time within countries, and they vary a lot on where they are within countries. Okay, so this is the kind of data that we have. This is really, really, really new. Like this week. Okay, so this is Guatemala. I'm gonna talk about Guatemala because it's a country that I've done field work in and that I know a fair bit about. Okay, so here I'm going to show you 3 different maps of 3 different things, 3 different kinds of environmental events. Okay, here we have environmental crimes. Okay, and we can see that this is highly concentrated up in the north of the country. This is a pretty lawless part of the country where the environmental crimes are things like illegal ranching, illegal forestry, illegal logging, and these sorts of things, okay? So it's not surprising that we see that this is in a particular part of the country. What about when we look at displacement? Well, it ends up displacement is much more widespread geographically. And part of this is in the same part of the country where these environmental crimes are happening, and it could be the displacement is partly a result of those crimes. But it's also the case that there's a corridor running through Guatemala that is subject to droughts, and those droughts are becoming more intense over time. And this allows us to see that the actual human responses to what we know is happening with the environment. Okay, and then there's a third map here, which is activism. And the map of activism doesn't look like any of the other maps in lots of ways because a lot of the activism is in Guatemala City, and that's not so surprising because that's where the national government is. Okay, but so this allows us to sort of map out the human response in a way that I think is really original and that we think is going to give us distinctive insight into the relationship between environmental change and human population movements. So what's next is we merge this with all that high resolution, high frequency environmental data. And now we can start to ask the question, what is the relationship between climate change at the local level and social and economic and political responses to that over different timescales? Okay, so that's the idea here. Product number 3, the pipe dream that is better than a pipe dream, is on human trafficking. Obviously, a huge problem, the scale of which we have a very hard time knowing because it's intentionally hidden from the world. Okay, this is again IOM data. Again, it's a bunch of figures. It doesn't really matter. Just look at the map. The map is where people are being trafficked from, and then the other one where they're being trafficked to. Okay, and we can just see that this is happening all over the world, and we're talking about the scale of millions of people. Okay, this is something that we really don't know much about, but we know that this is real and it's industrial scale. Okay, so this is a story that has just come out in the last month about human trafficking in Myanmar, where this is basically a regional network that was taking people who believed they were migrating, ended up trafficking them, and they worked in big giant buildings like that. That is a form of modern slavery where what those people are doing is these people have been trafficked to that site and they are calling my mother-in-law in order to steal her identity. Like that's what's going on. And the question is like, how does one disrupt this given that this is also illicit? Okay, so we know that there's a fine line between migration and trafficking. A lot of people believe that they're migrating. It ends up they're being trafficked, or they enter into a trafficking network somewhere along the way. How to uncover that? The idea here is a lot of the communication is happening over WhatsApp and other social media networks. In this case, what we have is a new platform that's been developed by researchers at Syracuse that will allow for what's called data donation. So now we have 70,000 enumerators from the IOM out in the field where we can talk to people, maybe, and we can say, listen, we are not trying to discourage you from migrating, but we all know that migration can be dangerous. And we want to give you the option of donating your WhatsApp data anonymously so that we can try to understand the conditions under which trafficking happens, okay? So now at the end of each day, if you've donated your data is anonymized and is sent to a server. And now we can build out the social networks of the people that are migrating. And my prior is that we're gonna see that people who end up being trafficked have a very particular kind of social media sort of network. And the big policy hope, of course, would be that you can then get at this before people enter into those bad networks, that you can come up with a way to sort of disrupt the actors that are serving to this sort of industrial scale human trafficking in places like Myanmar. Okay, so this is the idea. We're going to examine these networks before and after trafficking, and this is going to give us a moment of leverage when we might be able to do something about this thing. We can sort of see it in a way that we've never been able to see it. So we have an idea for a pilot in Southeast Asia this summer. And if we're going to really go to scale, we need to find some resources. And one of the great things about this partnership is that we're up and engineered so that we can actually do that. Okay, I want to say thank you to the Perry World House folks for hosting this. I want to say thanks to all of you for coming on a Friday afternoon. I do want to recognize all these people. They're so cool.
Yeah.
And they're in the era of, so all these people have worked on the stuff that you just saw, in an era of anti-migration sentiment, is really worth noting that the team that does this is from everywhere. Not everywhere, but is, we're very lucky to be at a place where we can work with the best and the brightest from so many places. So thank you, team.
All right, well, we do have time for some questions and responses, but I would like to start us off, if I might ask you one. And it's the kind of question that I get asked all the time in my work on adaptation, oftentimes by country governments. And that is, so we're going to get a clearer picture of the problem. We're going to get a clearer picture of when and how people move and what the correlates are, right? But I guess my question is, can you say a little bit more about what kinds of problems we can solve or what kinds of solutions we can find using this data? And just to give us more specific example, Eric, thinking about your map of Guatemala, do you expect the data to be able to tell you something like, we can project a big movement of people from this province in Guatemala where there's a drought, but we're going to be able to see if there's less movement from this province where farmers have more drought resilient seeds or they have better irrigation systems. What's the capacity and how will the DevLab approach these kinds of linking, more clearly illustrating the problem to offering solutions? And yes, I might be thinking about a partnership.
I think so to take that specific example, one of the things that the world is really concerned about is that people suffering environmental change displaced to neighboring communities, they put resource pressures on those communities, and this results in violence and other sorts of problems. And I think what we know that that's an issue because we can see it in the paper and we can see it on the ground, right? But we don't know that the time scale over which the environmental pressures were sort of emerging and being dealt with locally before people started moving. That's the kind of thing that we'll be able to begin to investigate in a way that I think is new. So I think that's, you know, that sounds hard, but that's fine. We like hard things.
And, and I'd like to add, partly because I should have said it at the beginning, like you did, this work is really because of the colleagues involved. And one that's in the room, I want to acknowledge Risky.
Yes.
Yeah, as well as the many colleagues in IOM's, I don't know, we have almost 400 offices in 175-ish countries. And it's those colleagues, literally the boots on the ground, the dedicated colleagues who are working with displaced people and their communities, with the migrants, that make this type of work possible. And of course, the amazing leadership of Amy Pope and all of them. And the practical bringing together with the university and DevLab. It's the combining of those ingredients that makes this kind of thing possible now. And it's practical and it matters because governments are asking us at IOM all of the time, where are the people? What do they need? Why are they coming? What do they want? What do they what do they need? The most basic questions, but it turns out that data, if it's done consistently, if it's comparable from place to place, if you have a sense of the temporal and spatial scale, those bits, it's not perfect, but it goes a very long way in helping countries decide what they want to do about the challenges that they're up against, as well as their aspirations. And most countries are going to want similar things. They want their people to be well. And I don't want to be kind of too blue-eyed about it, but most governments at the end of the day, that's the job of a government, to help maintain stability and to help people achieve reasonable well-being. And this kind of bringing together with that partnership and that practical focus enables that.
Great, thank you. I could ask you questions all day, but I know other people are eager to as well. Go ahead, sir.
So I just came from having a conference on Asia. And so this is the interesting thing. I deal with a lot of those in intercultural communities. But climate, for a lot of us, means storms, mean floods. But then when you mention coup d'etat, that's political.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to go back and say, okay, let's open up the whole idea about what climate means. But I think in that world, in our world, what you're talking about is environmental humanities. So give me 5 things that I can explain about what this climate thing means, because it's difficult for me. I'm thinking about a rainstorm.
Mhm. I mean, I guess I would say we have really good data on rainstorms, and we have really good data on droughts and stuff like that. And what we care about is how humans are responding to that. And in some cases, that is resulting in like local violence, as we get competition between communities over resources. And the trick is we haven't had good data on that kind of stuff, on the human adaptations. And that's what one of these projects is aimed at doing.
Or another practical example, if you imagine there are parts of the world where livelihoods are really, really directly dependent on the weather. So imagine that you're in the Sahel. You've got millions of people who herd cattle for a living, and they move their cattle across, they have a transhumance lifestyle, and they move their cattle across really large geographical areas. And obviously cattle eat grass, and grass depends on rain. And when rain patterns change, a herder would move their cattle at different times because they're following the pattern of grass, which follows the pattern of rain. a lot of those millions and millions of people also are farmers who raise crops, and crops are not grass, but they taste great, and cattle eat crops too. You can start seeing, to your point about local tensions, that if the herders show up at a time when the farmers have just planted their crops and the cattle trample the crops or eat the baby plants, sorry, I'm not a farmer, so whatever the croplings, whatever that is, you get the point, then it can cause some real tension. And being able to forecast those things and understand both how people and their livelihoods and those patterns interact, getting ahead of that allows you to drive programming and policy. I mean, there's no policy in the world immediately that will change the weather and immediately. But you can start thinking, okay, if we see a conflict coming, how can we help ameliorate it? And it's things like that, really practical things where this type of forecasting and understanding how it interacts with people and their livelihoods in their communities can help.
Yeah, and if I can offer one more quick example from the World Resources Institute, we're doing work on extreme heat in cities. Extreme heat is actually the biggest killer of people in terms of extreme weather events. And we are honing in on sort of how much of a difference does it make if you have shade trees along your roads? How much of a difference does it make if you have cool roofs? And how much of a difference does it make if you're able to send out an alert ahead of time that there's going to be a heat wave so that the hospitals know, or the schools can become cooling centers, that kind of thing. All right. Yeah.
So I'm really interested in the work that you're doing with WhatsApp and human trafficking. I think that's really interesting use of algorithmic. I don't know if that's sort of what the question I'm getting at. Is it algorithmic data? I don't really know how WhatsApp works. Or are you just looking at their networks? Are you looking into how people can get trapped into networks of being trafficked? Or what does that, what are you hoping to, what do you think you're seeing or seeing in these early sort of looking at it? I'm just really interested
I mean,
in that
we
project.
don't have this data yet.
Sorry.
There are a few projects that have used this technology to study different kinds of things, not this kind of thing. So we don't know what that data would look like. But my expectation is that so what people can volunteer is different channels, their WhatsApp channels. And my bet is that someone who is making the transition from believing that they are migrating to being trafficked is going to have a distinctive set of network interactions, and that is going to help us just see it in a way that we can't currently see it. Now, my dream is that there's actually a difference in the networks before the trafficking happens, such that you would be able to do something, before someone is trafficked, not just identify the bad networks, but actually prevent people from falling into the bad networks. Is this, I don't know if this is possible. I suspect that that's the case, and we won't know until we get all that data.
Yes, go ahead.
We have all. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This sounds like a fantastic initiative. Really looking forward to seeing how it develops. I've thought about climate displacement a little bit and also talked to the Florida Department of Emergency Management a little bit. And they do these really interesting retrospective surveys of evacuation behavior during hurricanes using cell phone mobility data. So that's just another kind of tip that maybe you can integrate into this approach. What they found in 2021, at least, was that the average person who evacuates from a hurricane is gone for 16 hours, right? So if we're operating on these month-long timescales, that's not going to pick up the vast majority of displacement, at least in a context like Florida. Now, obviously, the Sudans of the world are very different than the Floridas of the world, but I have a hunch that very, very short-term displacement around shocks is probably going on in the global south as well. So kind of wondering if you have data resources that could even, capture that kind of level of granularity. And then I think this relates to a broader point for policy, which is like, how should we think about displacement solutions in a kind of climate changing world? Like really the only solution is kind of permanent moves to resilience if you live in one of these, places that's expected to be a barely livable hot zone by 2070 or something like that. And so, if like climate migration as an adaptation is very short term and we're not incentivizing people to pursue the longer term move to more resilient localities, how do you kind of think about that as an organization, and what are the kind of policy solutions there, keeping in mind that people hold strong place-based attachments and like the right to live and remain in a place that you have lived for your whole life is also important. I have a hard time thinking about that and would be really keen to hear your thoughts.
I think you two should do the policy question. I'll do the data question.
And yeah, thank you. And Chris, it's really compelling the points that you've just made. In the displacement world, for those of you who do research or policy or operations in displacement, you'll know that this idea of durable solutions is really the goal. How do we help in a way that isn't only for today, but that really helps people who have been uprooted and risky? If you don't mind, because you've been working for so many years on the data side of displacement tracking and informing solutions to displacement, I wonder if you could, I interrupted a conversation between you and Chris earlier. Would you be willing to weigh in on that, on the solutions question?
Okay. Thanks, Coco. About solutions questions, I think, so we have, inside the team, we have two separate work streams, so to say. One is on foresight, forward-looking analysis, and so on, and one is on solutions to internal displacement. I do think while it works separately, these two are very, very much connected, because it's the same people that gets hit over and over again by shocks, whether that's environmental shock or it's conflict or anything. These are the most vulnerable of the population. They get displaced multiple times, the same area. So a foresight capability in many ways help building solutions as well, because you need to start to think when the next shock is going to hit the same group of people that are already vulnerable from the previous shocks. And we're not talking about small percentage of this. I mean, I don't have the percentage on top of my head, but like large percentage of the displaced populations are protracted IDPs that have been displaced for a decade in many places. So that's why the way, as I said, like we had these two work streams that works separately, but they are very well connected. So the concept of foresight for solution is not something strange at all. I mean, in terms of how we look at this initiative that we're doing with Eric. I hope that.
Actually, I'd be glad to. Just to add one U.S. relevant aspect to to what policies are effective. I mean, I think in the U.S. we're already seeing insurance being a driver of where people can and cannot go back to, right? So if you are in a California community that has been hit by wildfires a couple of times, you may not be able to get insurance that would enable you to rebuild. That's not the case everywhere, but I mean, to me, it is a good example of a policy lever that could be quite powerful to use more. And I mean, it is already happening. And I think that what's needed is someone with insurance companies are business, right? They do a lot of good, but they are businesses. And so how do we ensure that there are insurance policies that don't just squeeze out the poor people, and like make it so that they don't have the choices that they need. And it's only the wealthy people who can decide, who have full reign to decide where they want to live and where they want to settle. Yeah.
Can I just answer the data question? If you want higher frequency, more local data, I think you should do it. I mean, I think, we've gone from, what we're trying to do is go from annual and national to, departmental or municipal and monthly. And it's kind of hard. And I think it's a big improvement. And I think obviously there's more to be done. I don't know if you saw, there's a new working paper that involves Meta and a bunch of researchers where they're using, they're using metadata, and that would be great. That I think I know I'm just kidding.
And it's building strength on strength, isn't it? I love it sounds like you're saying, well, you do it. And well, please, you do it. But it's the amazing thing about this space with you, I think, because you have the tools, you're academics, and you're really pushing the boundaries of methodologies. And then by teaming up, an organization like ours or you've got offices all over the world, and you're getting your hands in your boots on the ground. Then you have test cases, and if we could partner up, that's super cool. And what you saw on the cover of the New York Times yesterday, that's a manifestation of that. And the cool thing is we have the most amazing mathematician who, using data sets, the metadata set is, I think it's 3 years, and it shows you what's possible. Using other data sets, this amazing mathematician that we have the privilege of working with has the potential to go back to 1960. And okay, granted, it's annual, bilateral, so country to country. But when you start backfilling the data in ways that allows you as data scientists to say, okay, it's the year 1963, you have a big driver event. What happened in what time scale afterwards? You can start testing it statistically, getting greater confidence about the relationships between variables, bring it all the way up to the present, and understand with greater rigor, what are the relationships between the drivers and the dependent variables, in this case, population movement, or what's going on in a specific place and time. Do we call that adaptation? Do we call it losses and damages? And that can then really help us move from what Amy Pope mentioned, help us move from anecdotes to something that might be more comparable and more systematic. And that's pretty exciting. And you absolutely have a role to play in that, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Broader Meta, not in the sense of the company Meta. And that is, it strikes me that this is a project that is encountering some new challenges. And let me just put 3 of them out there. One is a new set of relationships, which is sitting right here at the table, which is a subset of the new relationships, new technologies, and a changing political environment as well. So all 3 of these things are going to, I think, be a challenge when you try to knit together a series of actors who need to trust each other. Okay, so I know that IOM has spent, and maybe you can, I'm sure you can attest to this, but IOM has spent decades developing trust with states. No? And and in parallel, developing trust with migrants at the same time. This is not a trivial problem in a changing political environment. Now you've added a new actor, researchers, so academics who, it's a great partnership, but they're, not a perfect overlap. They're not perfect. They're not the same, don't have exactly the same motivations, right? And so now we have 4 actors in new relationships using new technologies now, which I want to emphasize. If you're talking about WhatsApp and you're exposing people to certain kinds of potential risks,
with sharing that kind of data with their geospatial locations. And yes, you're going to use the word anonymized. Why should they trust you? But moreover, in the new political climate, why should they ever trust that the state is not going to get their hands on some pretty sensitive information as well? So I guess maybe, and now let me say one other thing. When you're talking about trafficked persons, right, you're exposing them to particular sets of dangers because there's the potential, of course, for the networks that they're involved with to inflict retaliatory or preemptive kinds of harm to them if certain things are exposed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is talk more about the big problem. That seems like it's going to be problem cubed when in kind of the setting that now you're expanding into. Because I know this has been a problem for IOM in the past, and that you've worked very hard to try to develop a trust relationship. Can you say more about that?
For what it's worth, I was going to ask a less articulate version of the same question, so I'm glad you asked that.
That's definitely to you. That's hard.
It is hard.
It's hard. It's hard. I want to, Risky, do you have anything you'd like to add? Hmm.
I mean, I can try. I mean, this is part of our discussion also with Eric when we discussed about this idea. There's going to be a lot of challenges at a lot of levels, ethical, privacy, security, and so on. And we don't have the answers to all of them yet. That's why it's still it's an initial it's an idea that we are figuring out. Let me say. The key there is that the key is being inclusive and consultative. Talking about we're trying to do this from the global level, but you have different realities when you're actually looking at countries, different policies, different politics, governments, local actors, the networks itself. So it's very complex, and the way we are doing this is involving what Coco is saying, boots on the ground. So basically trying to answer those questions first, see how we will address the concerns, which we don't have the recipe right now, but it's all part, I mean, it's been part of the thinking and fully aware of what you're saying. In terms of trust, I think that's the part where governments, these are their citizens, right? At the end of the day, they are responsible to ensure the safety of their citizens. Of course, there are practices, exactly. And that's also, I think, parts that we have to navigate very, very carefully. Because us being there is basically to support, like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to help migrants. And we help the government to help the migrants. But of course, all of these are very important questions, and we have to figure them out, I guess. I don't think we have definitive answer right now, but the key is to involve as many brain as possible in that sense.
So Beth, just on there's a science piece of this, a research piece of this. I mean, I think one thing is like, at this point, we're mostly talking about observing something that is currently not observable, not exposing people to anything. People are going to make their choices and they're going to do what they're going to do. No, this is just purely passive. It's you agree once you scan something, and then there's basically an app on your phone that is uploading your data. You never need to interact with anything. I think yeah, I mean, this is like a very, this is a very something that we've talked about, that we have to think about really carefully. I think the bigger issue is like, this is where open science comes into conflict with politics in ways that can be really scary. And this, in my work, this has appeared in many ways over the years. But here is obviously really a big one. You can imagine, you could provide a government with, look, these are what these networks look like, and some kinds of governments that might be like very like, yeah, ones that are nearby for us and very sort of causing us all problems, might use that in ways that would be really negative. I mean, I'm just not interested in doing that. How to balance that with open science is really hard. We just got to figure it out.
We are at time, but I see one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
It's also about sort of political context and frameworks in which this wonderful project is taking place. Historically, IOM has always been a favorite IO of the United States. We can go right back in the history and see it. It's well known. We're now in a different political world. The administration's IO budget is now being contested, but it'll be out within a couple of weeks. On Tuesday, we have the executive orders targeted on environmental organizations questioning their 501(c)(3) status. We're going to see a whole swing of challenges saying they're political organizations, not public. And so my question to you all is that, will you be able to conduct this kind of continuing work without the United States, or in opposition to the United States, I guess is the question that I would ask.
For me, yeah, thank you. For me, a question arises about the public space and what one can do, because so many of us are thinking about this. We're impacted personally, jobs are on the line, all of those things. And I think many people in the room are brought together by a concern about the public space area. Literally, things that affect all of us, they're indivisible. Literally, the air that we breathe, the environment that makes so much of what is, what we experience possible, how we interact with one another. It's not private, it's public, it's shared. And I don't know. I only can pay tribute to the commitment that I see from so many colleagues to find a way. And my only response is, it's the question I'm asking everyone. What are you doing? How are you going to keep going? And I would ask you, do you have a recommendation? Almost like Risky's point, I didn't have a question about trust. We must maintain it. We must build it actively. We must protect it. It's easy to destroy. But once trust is gone, that's also a public good. And we can't do as much if we can't trust one another and be trustworthy. And so that's a bit of a philosophical note, but I am actively listening for those of you who are trying to figure it out too.
I mean, on a nitty-gritty practical level, GDI is under extreme pressure. We are under extreme pressure. This is not like in the future. This is like, in our case, it's millions of dollars that is gone because the Department of Defense removed funding for that environmental project, and because USAID eliminated funding for some of the other parts of the data that goes in here. So this is like a real no bullshit moment. And I think the good thing about having this kind of a relationship is that we can pivot fast. There are actors out there who care about these things, and of course it's a big shock for the U.S. to withdraw from this space. But we're nimble and we have good ideas and we have important ideas. And I think we're trying to find other actors already. We started like 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, to start moving. So, there's nothing to do but push.
If I can add a bit of an optimistic comment, I think to end on, I'll try. It's a good news, bad news. I mean, so, we are seeing so many US government data platforms being slashed, right? And the scientists who make them work. And to me, that does suggest that maybe there is even more need and more space and hopefully more support for organizations that can help fill the void for, where the US government isn't going to provide that type of data anymore. Just trying to be hopeful here. It's a big call, though. I think we should probably wrap up. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for joining us, even on a Friday night. I think we had a great discussion, some really good questions. I certainly appreciated hearing about the DevLab, and we'll be watching this space very carefully to see what you're up to, and looking forward to the results.